so day 4 of my Isle of Skye and Highlands road trip in the MGB is coming to an end. I've just got up and out this morning from the hotel. I quickly stopped for some fuel and also topped up my brake fluid as well, because the brake pedal travel is a little bit more since the Applecross Pass yesterday, so I think I might need to change my brake fluid at some point. Yeah, I hope they're okay to get me home. So today then is just a long slog down the motorway to get home, so I don't know how much footage of the drive I'll get because it's not going to be that interesting, but the purpose of this video really is A, to see if I can get home in the car, and B, to do a bit of a summary at the end of kind of what I've done, and yeah, just talking about the good things, the bad things, and any sort of advice I can lend to people thinking of doing the same thing. So yeah, let's hope I get home. Made it back in the car, which is quite miraculous, I suppose. Almost 1,500 miles in total, 1,480 I think was the grand total in the end of my Chipstead to Skye and back again trip, and what a trip it was. So what I'd like to do now is kind of summarise the last few days and kind of talk about some of the good stuff, some of the bad stuff, some of the things I might have done differently, where I went, and any sort of advice I can impart on people. I've got a bit of a list, so I'll work through that, so just have to bear with me. First of all, the trip, like I said, from Chipstead here in Surrey to Skye via Glencoe. Glencoe was a great overnight stop, so it's very beautiful there, and it's kind of a good jumping off point, I think, to get to Skye, as well as other sort of nice scenic roads and that sort of thing. Very enjoyable. And then making the way from Glencoe to Skye was very, very scenic, fantastic roads to drive on there, and quite easy from there to actually go in two different directions you can go to. You can either go via Glenfinnan and onto the ferry at Mallaig, I think it's called, or do what I did and go a bit further north, kind of looping round to Kyle, where I can get over on the bridge. Now that made sense for me to do that because the ferry only goes twice a day in winter, and it didn't line up with the kind of timings I was looking at, so the bridge seemed like a better route, even though I missed out on a couple of the more scenic areas on the way to the ferry, one of them being like the big aqueduct with the train that goes over the top that was in the Harry Potter films, I think. So a bit of a shame I missed out on that, but the other way was just as nice scenery wise, I think. I'll have to go back and check. Once on Skye, I made my way kind of to where I was going to stay overnight in this place called Sligachen, I think I still don't know how to say that, and then did a loop around the top of the island, and that was a stop off at the store to see that rock formation, which is very good. Recommend people do that. Maybe not in the weather that I did it because it was quite bad, but it's still kind of quite good to get a bit of exercise and yeah, it was interesting to go and see that rock formation, and then carried on northward to that mountain pass called the Quirang, I think it was called, or Quirang. Great views from up there, although I didn't actually look at them. I was looking at the road, and I'd recommend that people do that, but spend a bit more time there than I did. Then that road across the top of the mountain to, is it Uig or whatever it's called, the UIG, that was really lovely, and drop down into that town was great. Again, fantastic views. And then I came back to where I was staying that night from there, which was kind of the second day. And then the third day went out over to Neast Point. I think I mentioned it in the video. Really great drive over there, single track though, so it would be a bit hairy if it was busier than that, and lots of sheep and things everywhere, but great going over that way. Then I just kind of made my way back to the mainland from there. So on the mainland, I then headed north to the Applecross pass, and that was a great highlight of the trip, doing that pass in the MG. It felt like a bit of an achievement getting up there, and then all the way over to Applecross itself, which is on the coast. Wasn't much going on there, again could be off season or something like that, and then coming back was quite good as well. To come up the pass the other way was yeah, I wouldn't say it was as challenging, but there were some steep sections, and again great views as everywhere is in that part of the world, before heading back to Glencoe and then all the way home. So as I mentioned, the things I kind of missed were that aqueduct at Glenfinnan, which I would like to go back and see, and there's a whole section of Skye towards the south of the island which I didn't look at. That's down towards where the ferry would come into, and I'll just have to save that for another time, I think. And again, as I went up to Applecross, I'm sure there were more things to see there, different towns to stay in, and that's kind of one of the starting points of the NC 500, so I think that will have to be a future sort of separate trip to try and do some of that coastal route there. And I did kind of go past a few touristy spots that I could have gone and had a look at, the various museums and distilleries and that kind of stuff, but it was more of a driving trip rather than a touristy type of trip, so I concentrated on exploring and looking around the more scenic places rather than going to any sort of attractions and stuff. Other people may wish to want to do it a bit differently, but that suited me just fine. Avoided the crowds as well. So speaking of avoiding crowds, I should talk about the time of year that I went. So the first thing to talk about, I think, is the weather. So I had every type of weather, which I think is quite typical for this time of year, and it didn't really put a down on the trip too much, apart from just like the odd bit of filming which I wanted to do. You should take lots of different types of clothing, I think, for the weather, especially waterproofs if it's raining, and warm stuff if you decide to go anywhere which has got a bit of altitude, because I did have a bit of snow, as you saw. So having sort of preparation for different weather types is kind of essential for this time of year. The good thing about going here though, as I mentioned, quieter roads, so these single tracks that you go on for some of it, I would say in the summer months it's probably going to be a bit of a nightmare, because if you get stuck behind a slow car or a lorry or a camper van or something like that, you're going to get a bit frustrated, especially if it's a nice section of road and you might want to drive it if you're in something sort of fun to drive. But also going a bit slower, I guess you can appreciate the scenery a bit more. They're not really roads to sort of race on anyway. But yeah, it just makes the whole experience a lot easier if there's no cars on there, and I had a great time exploring without that sort of stop and start traffic and letting people past too much, so that was good. The other good thing was no midges. People talk about midges around that part of the Highlands and stuff, so yeah, no insect problems, which I think can be a bit of a problem in summer. My friend who did the bike tour after Ben Nevis last year was camping around the Highlands, and that was at the end of the summer, and he said there were midges everywhere and quite horrid. So yeah, that's a good thing about going at this time of year. Another thing to say, because it's in the off season, a lot of the places were closed, like shops, gift shops and that kind of stuff, which didn't really bother me too much. It would have been nice to have got more sort of food en route, like cafes and stuff like that, but it didn't really affect me too much that stuff was closed, but it's something to bear in mind. The other thing as well is hotels. Although the hotels I stayed in were quite nice for the budget that I had, and the food was very reasonably priced for the type of food it was, and the fact it was a hotel restaurant, I thought that was good. But what you will find is that they have less staff in the off season, so perhaps, you know, you might have one person who's manning reception and working in the bar, and you may have, you know, the same staff doing lots of different jobs. So if it's quiet, it's fine, but if you get a few people come in, then they've got to sort of rush around and do various bits and pieces. So, you know, it's not their fault, it's just the way the hotel's operating that time of year. And yeah, again, something to bear in mind. If you want to be attended to sort of all the time, then you might just need to wait or be patient or go another time of year. So yeah, I should talk about the roads. So the Highlands, where I was driving, was a mixture. So you had some nice sections of road which are kind of more fast flowing, sweeping bends, which, you know, you could go a bit faster on, up to sort of the 60-mile-an-hour limit as dictated there. But as you got towards Skye, the roads kind of got a little more rougher surfaced, a bit of sort of gravelly, not gravel tracks, but sort of loose gravel on the top of the roads, so a little bit slippier. And then on Skye itself, there were a lot of single tracks, occasional potholes and that kind of stuff. So something to bear in mind as to what car you should bring. I wouldn't bring anything that was kind of highly strung, you know, scrabbling for grip around corners and things, because you'll just get frustrated with the road surface, I think, and it might be a little bit edgy, and you'll be concentrating on trying to keep the car on the road rather than taking in all the scenery. As I said, 60-mile-an-hour limit, and I think that is an absolute limit for a lot of the roads. Some of the faster ones, again, yeah, you might want to go faster than that, but you shouldn't. But I'd say some of the bends come up quite quick, and so unless you really know the road, it would be silly to take sort of a high performance car and try and, you know, max it out on these things, because it's very dangerous, and you could easily go off the edge of these roads. There's no barriers on some of them, and there's also the risk of deer, and on Skye especially sheep, so you don't want to wreck your nice sort of fast car doing that. Just take something which you don't mind getting dirty, you don't mind banging into a couple of potholes, and ones which you don't mind leaving outside of a hotel overnight. So even though the hotels I stayed in had a dedicated car park, it wasn't a secure parking area, so I wouldn't take anything sort of flash or expensive or particularly low, just because it's a bit of a rougher terrain around there anyway. So yeah, directing attention to the car, the little MGB did me proud, making it there and back, but there were some things that kind of worked, some things that kind of didn't. So the things that did work are that I'm super glad that I did a service on the car. It ran really well, no hot start issues, which I had previously, which is excellent. The oil didn't burn at all. I checked the oil regularly, it hadn't gone down at all, even when I came all the way home, and it's still that nice sort of honey colour from fresh oil, so it's not all sooted up or anything like that. So really great, pleased with the car in that respect. That was brilliant. Another little thing which I was quite pleased with, not specifically with the car but something in the car, was that little pingy sachet. So you can see that the car is still not misted up from that, and that's been really good actually, especially in the mornings, to get a fast getaway. Often when I've had to start the car in colder weather, be misted up and you have to run the car for a bit to clear it, but that little sachet on the dashboard meant that at least the windscreen was free and I could get going straight away, so that was really cool. Things that kind of broke or weren't so good on the car, I talked about the door not shutting, random problem with the driver's door, wouldn't click shut, and I've had to adjust the striker plate slightly. No idea why that has started happening, not trip specific, I'm sure that's just something that happened. The fan belt started squeaking, so if anybody watched the video on the alternator that I did, I actually struggled to tension I'd get the fan belt onto the 3 pulleys there. It seemed like it was quite a tight belt and hard to sort of get it on there to start with, but after the first sort of 1,000 miles of use, it has sort of loosened up a bit, so just bear that in mind. If you put a fresh fan belt on, it might sort of stretch out after a little while, so I did have to sort of tension that again. It was fine after that. Tyre rub, I've mentioned that in previous videos, car's lowered, so going up steeper hills, the weight sort of transfers onto the back, and it did rub slightly, but nothing too bad there. The washer bottle, I think, is too small for this car, especially doing all that distance, and with the weather, the car's flicking up dirt onto the windscreen. I did use my washer bottle quite a lot and had to keep filling it up. Another thing as well to do with the weather was the wipers. So these behaved intermittently, and I had problems getting them going on some occasions, and other times they went very slow. and then they went fast and they went slow. So I don't know whether that's a wiper issue or some kind of electrical issue with the other stuff that was running in there. I did have the fan on quite a lot. So yeah, the wipers didn't let me down so much because they did work eventually, but when it was bucketing down, it wasn't so nice not to be able to see properly out the windscreen. The other thing to mention on the way back is that the car has developed an exhaust leak, I think, because I've got a bit of a funny exhausty smell in the cabin, and it started sounding a bit rough. Now this has happened to me a few times with this exhaust, and it's the Tourist Trophy one, if you've seen that advertised anywhere. And what they advertise it with are these flanged joints rather than sleeved joints, and it's supposed to be for ease of assembly or maintenance. But in reality what that means is that because they're just two surfaces mated together, the gaskets tend to blow, and then that creates an exhaust leak, and that is the end of that. So you have to get a new gasket, rub it all down, put it back together, and yeah, it's only a certain amount of time before it happens again. So yeah, sleeved exhaust probably more reliable, although more of a faff to fit. I don't know, something to take forward. I think about a different exhaust system. This car as well, MGB, is fun to drive. So it was really fun when I got to Scotland. It was tiring on the motorway though, because of the air rushing around the car is quite loud, and because this has got a Weber carb and that performance exhaust, it's just a loud-ish car anyway, with not much soundproofing. So yeah, it was a bit more tiring than a modern car, but I think it was worth it to have something fun to drive when I got there. So what would I change for next time? I'd say fix the wipers, because that was a bit hairy. Ideally something with multiple speeds. There's only one speed of the wiper, so I had to keep turning them on and off. An intermittent wipe would have been perfect. The heater as well, it'd be good to get an upgraded heater, both in sort of heat and yeah, it'd be good to have like another setting on it, like a 2-speed fan. I've only got a 1-speed fan, which is quite weak, so it'd be good to have that just to keep the windscreen clear. So overall then, the MG I think was a good choice. Like I say, this car isn't perfect, so I didn't mind it getting a bit muddy or dirty, a bit of water on it and bumping over a few potholes. That's fine, it's not a concourse car, it's a car to be enjoyed, and I like to enjoy it, and it's quite fun to drive at, you know, 50 or 60 miles an hour. It's not a fast car, but it's perfect on those roads because you feel like you can use the performance without getting frustrated, so that was really good. It's also quite well received by people who might be stuck behind you, or they can overtake you if they like, or they let you out of junctions. People tend to like this car when they see it. So, you know, it's not flash or expensive where people might think, oh, look at him and showing off. They think it's like a plucky little car, and I got lots of compliments and people want to talk to you. So that just makes the experience much nicer. And I'm proud of the car for getting me there and back, but I'm also proud in the ownership of this car. So I'm proud to be its owner and like to sort of bring smiles to people's faces, and I get a wave and that sort of thing. So that's really excellent. MG was a good choice. Next, I'll talk about the stuff I took and didn't actually need. So I took that heater, that gas heater, in case of emergencies. That was a bit overkill, I didn't really need to have that. I was just worried about getting stuck and being cold, and I thought a gas heater would be a good idea. It just took up room and I probably wouldn't have used it anyway. It probably would have been warm enough with a blanket on me and stuff like that, so that was a bit silly. The petrol I didn't use. I was kind of glad that I had it. There were a couple of occasions where I did run quite low on petrol and I was quite away from petrol stations, but I think that's just a planning thing. You could probably just make sure you topped up whenever you drove past a petrol station and you had less than half a tank. That's just my own lack of organisation. But yeah, the jerry can looks cool in the car, so that's fine. The water tank that I brought with me, I thought that would be overkill, but I did use it to top up my water bottle and the washer bottle in the car, so that did actually come in handy. So probably wouldn't need to take as much water as I took if you don't have any problems with your radiator or anything like that, but it did come in handy to have that sort of supply of water on the car. What else? Oh yeah, the jack and the spares, didn't use them, but glad I took them just in case, so that was fine. The one thing that did work quite well was my sat-nav. So I used a dedicated sat-nav device. It's called a Garmin Zumo XT2, which is a motorcycle sat-nav, but that only means that it's more rugged and has a few motorcycle specific features, and you can use it with gloves, but you can use it in a car which I did, because I bought it to use for when I pass my tests and do motorbike adventures and stuff. But I used it in the car, really good. You can create these routes on an app on your phone or on the device itself, and it suggests scenic routes and that kind of thing. The advantage of having a separate device was that my phone didn't run out of batteries while I was using it, which is really cool. So that's one reason why I bought it. Second reason is signal. Obviously all the maps are loaded onto a dedicated sat nav, so you don't need signal for it to operate, whereas a phone, you know, it uses data or you know, 4G signal, whatever, and that isn't always available in more remote areas, so it's good to have that separate device. But the thing I really liked about that one is the trip data and speedo. So my MG's speedo isn't very accurate, and it's got a you know, mileometer trip thing, but doesn't work very well either. So it's good to have that as a separate, more accurate display on that sat nav device. And it's got all these other functions as well, like elevation. So when I was going up that Applecross Pass, I could see how far I had to the top and that kind of stuff. It was just kind of geeky stuff, but I really liked that about it. You have all that stuff in modern cars and you kind of get used to it in there. When you've got nothing in this, then you do kind of miss that little bit of extra data, so that's really cool. And I think it's probably recorded all of my trip as GPX files, which I can then replay if I wanted to visit the same spot again another time. So yeah, that sat nav was really good. It also pairs with your phone, and you can use it to play your music through it as well, just as a single device. And I had it playing out of a Bluetooth speaker, so having that single device in the car, which is really easy to use and all just, you know, a finger stretch away from the steering wheel, was perfect. Phone's a little bit more fiddly for that because that's built to be operated from a vehicle, whereas a phone isn't really. So yeah, that was really good. So then, moving on to kind of the conclusion of the trip, because I've just been talking about the MG and how I really like this car and everything, I kind of wanted to say the star of the show is the MG, but I don't think that's the case. I think the star of the show is Scotland, especially the Highlands and the Isle of Skye. So what a place. I mean, the scenery was off the scale in terms of a magnificent view around every corner. And I think I hope that I've, you know, conveyed a bit of that of these videos, but I think the problem is that a lot of these action cameras are quite wide angle, and what happens is that it makes everything look quite far away and flat, whereas in reality the landscape is, you know, up here and, you know, down there, and you really do need to see it for your own eyes. And it's quite a moving place in some ways as well. So as you kind of move through the scenery, it's all very nice and things, but I had sort of music playing, and I won't say what kind of music because I think that's quite subjective. Some people like certain types of music, others like other music. You might feel my music taste is really bad. That's fine, because I might think that yours is bad or good or whatever. But anyway, playing some quite apt music moving through the scenery, it's just amazing how that kind of stirs up sort of emotions. Not saying I was sort of blubbing in the car or anything like that, but, you know, sort of the hairs on the back of your neck sort of standing on end as this, you know, scene unfolds in front of you with the right music playing was just an excellent experience. So I encourage anyone to make their way up to Scotland. And I don't think you do need to go in a classic car or, like I said, you know, something flash or anything. Your family car is fine. Everything is outside that you need to see. You don't need to have something to look at inside or outside. You know, the car is sort of secondary to the experience. I mean, it does help if you enjoy driving, and I think it did help that I took something that was fun to drive, but you don't want something that's going to take away from the experience of seeing what's outside, because that's really what you're there for and what you want to get from the trip, those memories. So yeah, so that's I think that's about it. So I really hope you've enjoyed this video series of my trip from sea to Skye. I had an excellent time. It's a trip that I will remember hopefully for the rest of my life, and I really hope that I have the opportunity to go back there at some point, maybe again in the MG, maybe in the Jag, maybe even in the Lotus one day, or on a bike. So yeah, there's lots more to see in Scotland, I'm sure, and I'll be back there again another time. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in a future video. Thanks all, bye bye.